Good morning, my students. That's me, Dr.هاني الحسني, and that's our brilliant course novel for junior students. So we still in novel 1984, and that's the original novel. We try to discuss and share our thought here in case of we need more clarification. So for chapter 20 we finished last time to talk about what's going on within chapter 19 when O'Brien re-educated Winston about 2 plus 2 made 5, and he finally surrendered and accepted what O'Brien taught him. And here there are 3 stages in your reintegration, said O'Brien. So now in chapter 20, O'Brien asked Winston to forget whatever he had done before in case of being a rebellious person or thinking about doing anything against the party. And here description about what's O'Brien trying to do. So he said here, it was chiefly when he showed stupidity that O'Brien pulled the lever. Sometimes they got through the whole session without use the dial. He couldn't remember how many sessions there had been. The whole process seemed to stretch out over a long indefinite time, weeks possibly, and the intervals between the session might sometimes have been days. And in that chapter, we can understand the communication between Winston and O'Brien about the book, the Goldstein book. He asks O'Brien, "You have read it?" And O'Brien replied, "I wrote it." So I wrote it, like he in the same time surprised. Winston surprised. Why? Because he looked for a longer time about the Goldstein book until O'Brien gave it to him. As he said, the party or Big Brother wrote it, and other people who already in the party for a longer time, they wrote it, and suddenly he said, "I collaborated in writing it. No book is produced individually." And that's how he described his involvement in writing the theory and ideology for the party. And he said to him in this chapter as well, something like he said, a pang of pain had shot through his body. O'Brien had pushed the lever of the dial up to 35. That was stupid, Winston. Stupid, he said. You should know better than to say a thing like that. He put the lever back and continued. Now I will tell you the answer to my question. It is this: the party seeks power entirely for its own sake. So O'Brien replied him that the party just look for power, nothing less, nothing more. And in that quotation also, the German Nazis and Russian communists came very close to us in their methods, but they never had the courage to recognize their own motives. So he taught him about the motives of the party, and power is not means, it is an end. So power, it doesn't have a mean, but it's an end. It something for a final target for the party. So it looks like a dictatorship, but one doesn't establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard the revolution. One makes the revolution in order to establish a dictatorship. And Winston already struck, as he had been struck before by the tiredness. So he has fainted when he looked at O'Brien's face. Then continuing their own questions, and he kept asking about East Asia and Eurasia. But you are not even master of this planet. What about East Asia and Eurasia and East Asia? You haven't conquered them, he said. Aubrey replied, unimportant. You shall conquer them when it suits us. And if we didn't, what difference would it make? And here they say Oceania is the word. Oceania is the word. So for those who will read the chapter 20, will recognize that the way of the conversation, how somebody is torturing you and you are trying to get an answer from him one by one. And here O'Brien said, or Winston said, what are the stars? Said O'Brien indifferently. They are bits of fire a few kilometers away. We could reach them if we wanted to. So in that part, he tried to tell Winston, don't be stupid. We are knowledgeable. We can reach wherever we want. The Earth is the center of universe, the sun and the stars go around it. Winston made another convulsive movement. This time he didn't say anything. So why he didn't say anything? Because he started to be in despair. There is no hope. There's nothing to be in kind of defying or challenging, and that's how he moved down. Like, this is what we call falling action. The falling action here, he changed his mind to accept others' opinions. I told you, Winston, he said, the metaphysics is not your strong point. The word you are trying to think of is cerebrism. And here he said, Winston thought by making him suffer. He said, so when you suffer, you can think. Obedience is not enough for you. So he said, if you obey, is not enough unless he is suffering. And that's the way for thinking about the chapter 20. If we need to read more about chapter 20, we can say the way for O'Brien. O'Brien forces Winston to look in a mirror. He has completely deteriorated and looks gray and tired. Winston begins to weep and blame O'Brien for his condition after he recognized his look in the mirror. O'Brien replied that Winston knew what would happen the moment he began his diary. Like, O'Brien reminded Winston, whatever happened to you or occurred to you, it started since you began your diary, so it's your fault. O'Brien acknowledges that Winston has held out by not betraying Julia, and Winston feels overwhelmed, like he feels that at that moment Winston has nothing in his mind, no one like Julia in his mind. His beloved already gone, because O'Brien informed him that Julia already betrayed him and he should betray her back. And O'Brien's tell Winston not to what we call here, not to worry about anything. The later stage will be of healing or curing him. And O'Brien at the end said everybody or everyone is shot anyhow. Everybody or anybody can be shot anyhow, or suicide. And there is here something, the voice had battered Winston into helplessness. So in page 155, he felt that he totally helplessness. Nobody looked at him, nobody helped him, and yeah, he somehow you will fail. Something will defeat you. Life will defeat you. That's how O'Brien reminded him about his condition. We control life at all. And also that's another reminding how the party is quite tough. In the next page, Winston began to dress himself with slow, stiff movements. Until now, he hadn't seemed to notice how thin and weak he was. So, after he looked at himself in the mirror, he found that he looked very weak and he had nothing to do with others. Before he knew what he was doing, he had collapsed onto a small stool. He was aware also of his ugliness, his gracelessness, bundle of bones in filthy underclothes sitting. And O'Brien laid hand on his shoulder almost kindly. It wasn't last forever, he said. So O'Brien reminded him, it will not be like this forever. You can escape from it whenever you choose. Everything depends on yourself. You did it, sobbed Winston. You reduced me to this state. So the Winston, after he blamed O'Brien, O'Brien replied, "No, Winston, you reduce yourself to it. That's how you drag yourself to room 101." And at the end of the next page, 100, I think 58, he said, "Tell me how soon will they shoot me?" He asked O'Brien when they will kill him. It might be a long time, said O'Brien. You are a difficult case, but don't give up hope. Everyone is cured sooner or later. In the end, we shall shoot you. So he reminded Winston that you will be killed sooner or later, but not at the moment. For chapter 21, in the next page 159, it started. He was much better. He was growing fatter and stronger every day. It was proper to speak of days. So Winston now recovered and he had a better body looking. He healed somehow, but why? Because he changed. And like when somebody is changed, you can do something. So after some time, we can say Winston is transferred to more comfortable room, and the torture easy or become very easy or reduced. He also dreamed of Julia, his mother, O'Brien, and his country. He gains better weight, and his health is already recovered. Consequently, he comes to a conclusion he was too stupid to oppose or to stand against the party alone, and he tried to believe in slogans. That's why he write down in his diary again, freedom is slavery, 2 and 2 make 5, God is power. So that's how he helped himself, and he said that Winston screams out Julia's name many times, terrifying himself, and he tried to inform others like that even with O'Brien torture, I still need her. He realizes that his way to think about anything against the party is already vanished, and he tried to show his hatredness to anybody who stand against the party, and he then think about hating the party because they will kill him later on, as O'Brien reminded Winston, you will be killed or you will be shot one day, and that's how he cannot hide his feeling. Even Winston tells the guard that he hates Big Brother. O'Brien replies that obeying Big Brother is not sufficient, but what is important is how to start loving him. So when you love Big Brother, that's the point. And when that happened, he asked the guard to send back again Winston to room 101. Even he like here in page 160, he wrote down in his diary that freedom is slavery, 2 and 2 make 5. That's the slogans of the party. So he believed in it, and he wrote it with his own pencil. The pencil felt thick and awkward in his fingers. Even when he wrote it, he felt there is something awkward, but he has no option. And that's how it's going on with this chapter. If you look down, when O'Brien walked into the cell behind him, "Get up," said O'Brien, "come here." Winston stood opposite him. O'Brien took Winston's shoulders between his strong hands and looked at him closely. "You have had thoughts of deceiving me," he said. "That was stupid. Stand up. Look me in the face." He paused and went on the gentle tone, "You are improving." So he reminded him that he is still in the right way. But what he did here, when the name of Big Brother already mentioned, they asked him, "What are your true feelings toward Big Brother?" He say, "I hate him." So when you hate somebody like Big Brother, you need to repent, or you need to show your regression, or how you regret. But he didn't. He said, you must love him, and that's why they send Winston back to room 101. In chapter 22, what happened in chapter 22? The room 101, or in the room of 101, O'Brien straps Winston, or put Winston in the chair, then already tie him and his head. So he felt that he couldn't move anywhere. So the torturing is increased in room 101 again, as he already tied all over of his body. He cannot do any kind of movement. The worst thing in the world contains in room 101, and Winston of his worst nightmares that come into him day and night. He remembered what O'Brien did to him all over the story. And then later on in that chapter, Winston face something like he put in front of Winston a rat. So the rat moved around the face of Winston and eat it. So eat what? He put liver in Winston's face, and the rats started to eat what is around his face. So the torture is totally complicated, and it's really severe. Winston screams that he wants O'Brien to subject Julia in his torture. Instead of him, he asked O'Brien to help him somehow. He couldn't tolerate looking at rats moving around his face, and O'Brien, satisfied at the moment by his betrayal, so he removes the cage that surrounded his face, and he kicked out the rats that around him. So in room 101 again, what happened here? It's another stage of torturing when he used the cage. This cage, it handled his face and it controlled all of his body, especially his face. And for him, you can't do that. He cried out in a high, cracked voice. You couldn't. It's impossible. It's impossible to leave him in that situation and say, do you remember the moment of panic that used to occur in your dreams? And O'Brien said Winston, making an effort to control his voice. O'Brien made no direct answer for him. He just ignored him. And later, or at the end of the chapter here, do it to Julia. So he betrayed Julia. He betrayed Julia. Do it to Julia, not me. Julia, I don't care what you do to her. Tear her face off. Strip her to the bones. Not me. So the torturing of the cage and showing him the rats is totally disgusting and really very awful situation. That's why at the end O'Brien was still standing at his side. There was still the cold touch of wire against his cheek. So they put the wire electricity in his cheek, but through the darkness that involved or enveloped him, he heard another metallic click. So the torturing time is still moving on in chapter 23, which is the last. So he glanced up at the vast face, and Big Brother is watching you. That's in front of him, and it looks like in this chapter Winston is now free. So is now free. He sits at the not a tree, the cafe that he used to sit in, and we say that a picture of Big Brother is watching you is in front of him, and in that part we can see that he enjoys a glass of victory again, watches the telescreen. He accepts everything in the party, and without any thinking of anybody, he's still smelling the rats. Even he traces that 2 plus 2 is equal 5, and he found as well that they had betrayed each other. Winston and Julia betrayed each other a lot of times. Even he promised Julia not to betray her, and they walked beside each other. Nobody is talking to each other, and I sold you and you sold me. That's how Winston replied to Julia when he said, under the spreading chestnut tree, I sold you and you sold me, which he heard when he saw the political prisoner there many years earlier. And then at the end, he listened to the war news. He reassures himself of both the great victory, and he has won over himself and his newfound love for a Big Brother. So you can see here the way of the conversation. It looks like here the voice from the telescreen paused and added, you are warned to stand by for an important announcement at 50:30. 50:30, this is news of highest importance. So he heard the news, and then they can't get inside me. 2 plus 2 is equal, of course, 5. And he said that O'Brien had said, what happens to you here is forever. That was true. So nothing can be changed, and no one is following Winston. Winston is alone, and Here, when Julia is beside him, her feet seem to have grown broader. He noticed, I betrayed you, she said badly or boldly. I betrayed you, he said. So she informed him that he or she betrayed him, and then he replied, I also betray you back. She gave him another quick look of dislike. Sometimes she said, they threaten you with something you can't stand up, can't even think about, and then you say, don't do it to me. So Julia felt disappointed, and she already admitted that she betrayed him, and he said her back that he betrayed her. And then if you follow the chapter and the conversation, you can find what? You can find at the end of that kind of novel, he loved Big Brother. He loved Big Brother. That's how we need to think about the final conclusion of the whole novel, how it started about hating Big Brother and how it ends with a few words, he loved Big Brother. So that's a conclusion, a clear conclusion. He already surrendered and give up, and he has nothing to do with the party. I wish you can understand everything. In appendix there is principles of newspeak. So when we talk about a newspeak, we need to understand that it's not a big deal to understand what is newspeak, but the newspeak it is a way that it's written by the party, how they change the language, how they made their own language, and how they change the history. So to remind you again, in page 173, only like 2-3 words. He said he loved Big Brother, and the novel is finished. But in appendix, we need to understand, if somebody interested in reading about the newspeak and finding what do we mean by newspeak and the language that being used for the party, you can read it for your own. It's not important for me to read the appendix, but it's important for those who want to do kind of literary criticism. I hope that you enjoyed that story, but or that novel. Before we finish, we need to tell you some or one quotation when he mentioned and perhaps you might pretend afterwards it was only a trick and that you just said it to make them stop and didn't really mean it, but that isn't true. That isn't true. So that quotation is in the last chapter. Like in the last chapter, there is some quotations, and one of these quotations, as I mentioned, perhaps you might pretend. I can show you later on in the Zoom discussion. So I think this novel has a lot of ideas, especially to the politics. For you, if you read it, you can read this kind of quotation in page 170. I sold you and you sold me. How he felt totally down and he regretted for everything. Nobody with him. You sold me and you sold. I sold you and you sold me. That's how maybe the capitalist people live. Everything is for benefit, unless the communist. So it shows you how awful the capitalist part can be at the end. In the same time, it's totally against the communist people. I hope that later on we can start with a discussion about psychoanalytic analysis. We try to follow the psychoanalytic analysis or theory to discuss what's going on within these lines and the chapters that we discussed. I wish to see you again and see you later. Thank you very much.